The laughter came before I saw him, not polite laughter, not the kind people used to smooth over awkwardness. This was sharp, sudden, and cruel like a glass, breaking in a quiet room. The ungrateful wife is here. The words sliced through the hum of the launch party and landed squarely on my chest. I felt them before I understood them, a tightening, a heat behind my eyes, a brief dangerous moment where my body wanted to react before my mind could catch up. I didn't flinch. That alone surprised me. The ballroom smelled like expensive whiskey and fresh ink, new contracts, new power. Somewhere nearby, a crystal glass clinked against another. Applause followed. I took one step forward, then another, my heels echoing softly on polished stone, steady as a metronome. Each step said the same thing: you are still here. You are still standing. I found Evan on the small stage at the front of the room. My husband, or something that still answered to that word, technically. He was mid-laugh, head tilted back, hand resting on the shoulder of one of his partners. The sound of his voice, warm, familiar, careless, hit me harder than the insult. He didn't look at me. Not once. The applause swelled again as someone raised a toast to vision and bold leadership. The words blurred together, corporate poetry meant to sound noble and inevitable. I stood there invisible in plain sight, while the story of Evan's success unfolded as if I had never existed. A man I didn't recognize approached me. Gray suit, perfect posture, the faint scent of cologne that tried too hard to be forgettable. He didn't introduce himself. He handed me an envelope, not gently, not rudely, efficiently, like a waiter dropping a check at the end of a meal. Sign the divorce, he said under his breath. Take nothing. Leave. I looked at the envelope. Thick, heavy. The kind of weight that doesn't come from paper. For a moment, the room went very quiet inside my head. I could still hear the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the soft murmur of deals being made, but it all felt distant, like I was underwater. I thought of all the nights I stayed up late reviewing numbers while Evan slept. The calls I made quietly, making sure his transition out of the firm wouldn't burn bridges. The investors I convinced not because they believed in him, but because they trusted me. I had built the scaffolding. He was standing on it, waving to the crowd. And now I was being erased from the blueprint. The man shifted his weight, impatient. You understand, he added as if clarity were a courtesy. I nodded once. I do. I took the envelope, feeling the smoothness of the paper under my fingertips. It was cool, impersonal, final. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I looked back at the stage. Evan was smiling, wide, easy, triumphant. The smile of a man who believed the hardest part was over. He caught sight of me then finally, and something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not fear, annoyance. He excused himself from the applause and crossed the room with quick, irritated steps, taking my elbow as if I were a problem to be managed. Now he hissed, steering me toward a side corridor. You had to do this now. The hallway was colder. The sound changed. No laughter here, just the muted thrum of music and the distant buzz of celebration leaking through the walls. He pushed open a small conference room and closed the door behind us. Silence fell fast and heavy. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and new leather chairs. A clock on the wall ticked loud, insistent. I focused on that sound. Tick, tick, tick. It helped. This didn't have to be public, he said, loosening his tie. But since you showed up, we're doing it cleanly. I set the envelope on the table between us. I hadn't opened it yet. I already knew what it said. Take nothing, I repeated softly. That's the offer. It's generous, he replied without hesitation, given the circumstances. I studied his face, the lines I used to trace with my thumb when we lay awake talking about the future, the eyes that once searched mine for reassurance. What circumstances? I asked. He exhaled sharply. Don't do this, Sloane. Don't play confused. You've been difficult, and this firm can't afford uncertainty. There it was. Not we, not us, the firm. I thought of the speech folded neatly in my bag, the one I'd written for tonight. the one where I planned to announce a pro bono fund in his late father's name. A way to honor the man Evan used to admire. A way to remind him why he became a lawyer in the first place. I had practiced it out loud, in the car, in the shower, in the quiet moments where I still believed love could be steadied with intention. All I needed was for him to look at me. He never did. "Are you sure?" I asked. It was the only question that mattered. He looked at me, then really looked. His eyes were flat. Decided. Yes. The word landed with the finality of a gavel. I picked up the pen. The clock kept ticking. I listened to it as I signed my name. Each stroke was smooth, deliberate, no shaking, no pause. When I finished, I slid the papers back into the envelope and stood. "That's it?" he asked, surprised. "That's it." I smiled. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a plea. It was simply complete. I walked back into the ballroom alone. The laughter rose again, swelling as someone cracked another joke at my expense. I moved through it unhurried, the sound brushing past me without sticking. At the door, I paused just long enough to take one last breath of the room. The noise, the celebration, the certainty that none of this would touch me again in the way they thought it would. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I said it quietly to myself, a truth I didn't need anyone else to hear. They think I'm leaving with nothing. I closed the door behind me, the laughter cut off in an instant. They don't know, I just put my hand on the switch. The envelope felt heavier once I was alone, not because the paper had changed, but because the room had gone quiet enough for me to hear myself breathe. The parking garage swallowed the sounds of the city, replacing them with the hollow echo of my footsteps and the distant whine of an engine somewhere below. My car greeted me with a soft, familiar chirp when I unlocked it. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. Silence. I didn't start the engine right away. I placed the envelope on my lap and ran my thumb along the edge, feeling the precise seal, the kind that assumes compliance. My hands were steady. That surprised me again. I had expected shaking, tears, something cinematic. Instead, there was only clarity. I opened it. The pages slid out cleanly, already aligned, already final. I scanned quickly. I didn't need to read every line. I knew the language. I had lived around it long enough. Take nothing, waive all claims. A clean division. Clean. That word always made me smile in a bitter way. There is nothing clean about erasing someone from a shared life. I exhaled slowly and leaned back, listening to the faint creak of the seat beneath me. Somewhere above, the party was still going. I imagined the laughter spilling into the night like champagne foam, unaware that the foundation beneath it had just shifted. It occurred to me then, sharp and sudden, that Evan hadn't chosen that night by accident. A launch party, his launch party, full of witnesses, full of momentum. He had turned the end of our marriage into a case study, a public exhibit of control. I was meant to be the opening act. I closed my eyes for a moment, and the memory came without warning. The first time I met Evan, we were standing in line for bad coffee at a legal conference neither of us wanted to attend. He had smiled at me, genuine, a little crooked, and said, "If I have to listen to one more panel about billable hours, I might actually scream." I laughed then. Really laughed. He talked about justice like it was a calling, not a ladder. About wanting to do things differently. I believed him because he believed himself. Or at least he did back then. The memory faded, leaving behind the uncomfortable question I had been avoiding for years. What did I miss? Had the signs been there all along, hiding in plain sight? Or had I fallen in love with a version of him that no longer existed? One that had quietly slipped away, while I was busy building the future I thought we shared. I looked back down at the papers. I hadn't signed because I was weak. I signed because I refused to beg for love that required my disappearance. There is a difference. I folded the documents carefully and slid them back into the envelope. When I started the engine, the low hum filled the car, grounding me. The clock on the dashboard blinked once, then settled. As I pulled out of the garage, the city opened up around me. Streetlights stretched into lines of soft amber, and the windshield caught the faint mist of night air. I drove without music, letting the sound of the tires against pavement keep time with my thoughts. At a red light, my phone buzzed. Once, then again. I didn't look right away. I waited until the light turned green until I was moving again before glancing down at the screen. Notifications stacked on top of each other like dominoes. Messages, missed calls, emails. Too many. Not from Evan. Not yet. These were from people I hadn't spoken to in months. A few numbers I didn't recognize at all. A text that read only, "Is this true?" Another that said, "Call me ASAP." I felt a small cold understanding settle in my chest. They had been preparing for this. 6 months earlier, when Evan told me he wanted to start his own firm, I didn't hesitate. I asked questions, yes, but I didn't doubt him. I agreed to provide bridge funding, not as a grand gesture, but as a safeguard. $20 million structured carefully, routed through entities designed to protect more than just profit. I wasn't funding a man. I was protecting a system. The employees who would take the risk with him. The clients who trusted the name. The reputation he said he wanted to honor. And because I had learned long ago that love without boundaries is not love, it is exposure, I added terms. Quiet ones. Responsible ones. If there was fraud, if there was misuse, if there was deception, the funding could be withdrawn from the riskiest leverage. I had prayed I would never need that clause. I thought of the nights Evan started taking calls on the balcony, lowering his voice, as if distance could disguise intention. The way his phone stayed face down on the table now. The new advisors whose names came up more and more often, always accompanied by vague explanations. I had noticed. I had just hoped I was wrong. The phone buzzed again, sharper this time. A notification from my bank app slid onto the screen. Authorization ready. I pulled over. The car idled softly as I stared at the words, my pulse steady but deliberate. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel for a brief moment, breathing in the faint scent of leather and night air. I never wanted this, I whispered to the empty car. I believed that. And yet here it was. The city continued around me, indifferent and alive. Somewhere glasses were still clinking. Somewhere Evan was still smiling for cameras. I straightened, lifted my head, and unlocked my phone fully. More messages loaded in. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography. I scrolled once, then set the phone down without responding. As I pulled back into traffic, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not satisfaction, readiness. I spoke the words aloud, not as a threat, not as a promise, but as a fact. And I was too. I parked in my driveway and sat there, long after the engine went quiet. The house greeted me with its usual stillness, the soft click of the cooling hood, the distant rush of traffic a few streets away, the faint hum of the refrigerator inside. I carried my bag in, set it by the door, and leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment. The silence pressed close, not empty but attentive, like it was waiting for me to speak. I didn't. I slipped off my shoes and walked through the living room, my steps slow measured. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and the candle I'd lit that morning, hopeful in a way that felt naive now. I set my bag on the dining table and opened it. The speech was still there, folded neatly, uncreased, untouched. I sat and unfolded it carefully, as if it were something fragile. My handwriting stared back at me, confident, rounded, intentional. The opening line caught my breath. Tonight isn't about a firm. It's about why we choose to practice law in the first place. I closed my eyes. I had written it for Evan. For the man who used to talk about justice with reverence. For the son who still carried his father's name like a quiet standard he hoped to live up to. The gift was meant to be announced publicly. A pro bono fund seated quietly, sustainably. A commitment that would allow the firm to take cases others wouldn't, people without money, without leverage, without voices loud enough to be heard. It was going to bear his father's name. I imagined Evan standing beside me, his hand warm at my back, listening as the room softened. I imagined the applause, not the hollow kind, but the kind that means something landed where it should. All he had to do was look at me. He never did. I folded the paper again and set it aside. It didn't belong to that night anymore, or to him. 6 months earlier, Evan had come home buzzing with energy, pacing the kitchen as he talked about independence vision, the need to build something that was his. I listened. I asked questions. I asked more when the answers came too easily. When he finally asked me for support, I didn't say yes right away. I asked for structure, $20 million, bridge funding, temporary targeted, designed not to inflate ambition, but to stabilize transition. I routed it through a trust structure that insulated employees and clients from the volatility of ego. Evan saw the number and smiled. He didn't read the fine print. That wasn't negligence. It was assumption. I had insisted on safeguards, not because I didn't trust him, but because I trusted systems more than people in moments of change. The clause was simple. If there was misrepresentation, if there was misuse of funds, if there was any attempt to distort governance or exploit trust, I could pull the money from the riskiest leverage without collapsing the firm. He agreed. Too quickly. At the time, I told myself that was confidence. Now I knew better. I moved through the house, flipping on lamps, letting pools of warm light soften the corners. I changed into a sweater, brewed tea, and sat at the kitchen counter, wrapping my hands around the mug. The ceramic was warm, steady. My phone lay face down beside it. I thought about the changes I'd noticed and brushed aside. The way Evan's phone always ended calls before I could ask who it was. The new advisors whose names appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The offhand comments about necessary optics and controlling narratives. I had felt the shift before I understood it. Love makes you generous with doubt. The tea cooled as I sat there listening to the clock tick over the sink. Each second sounded heavier than the last. I picked up my phone and turned it over. The screen lit up instantly. More messages, more missed calls, and then another notification. Authorization ready. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with grief. I hadn't wanted to be right. I scrolled, not reading everything, just enough to confirm what my body already knew. The patterns were there, the timing, the coordinated confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding spiraling out of control. This was momentum built without me. I stood and walked to the window, staring out into the dark. A neighbor's porch light flickered on. Somewhere a dog barked once, then settled. The world kept moving, oblivious to the line I was standing on. I remembered a conversation Evan and I had late one night months ago. He'd been restless, pacing like he did when something wasn't aligning the way he wanted. "You don't trust me," he'd said lightly, like a joke. I had looked up from my laptop and met his eyes. "I trust you," I said. "I don't trust what pressure turns people into." He'd laughed, kissed my forehead, changed the subject. I walked back to the table and sat. The envelope from the party lay where I'd dropped it earlier, stark and unimpressive. I didn't look at it again. Instead, I opened my banking app. The authorization screen waited patiently, neutral and precise. No judgment, no drama, just options. I thought of the employees who would wake up tomorrow unaware that the ground under them had shifted. The assistants, the associates, the junior partners who had bet on Evan's promise. They didn't deserve to be collateral. I tapped through the screen, slowly reading every line, confirming every safeguard. The system responded smoothly, as if relieved to be used the way it was designed. My phone vibrated again, harder this time. Evan. I didn't answer. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple. The weight in my chest wasn't anger. It was mourning. For the version of us that had already ended long before tonight made it official. I hoped I'd never need this, I whispered into the quiet kitchen. The words felt like a confession. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen once more. The button was there, small, unassuming, read only an implication, not color. Authorization ready, I swallowed. "I prayed you'd never force my hand," I said softly. My thumb hovered. Then I let it rest, and I whispered the truth, steady, clear, undeniable. "Tonight you pressed it for me. I didn't press it dramatically." There was no surge of adrenaline, no cinematic rush. Just a quiet click of confirmation and a line of text that changed from pending to processing. The room didn't shake, the lights didn't flicker, the world didn't announce what had just happened. That's how real power moves without asking for applause. I set the phone down, wrapped my fingers around the mug again, and took a breath that felt deeper than any I'd taken all night. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady, almost calm, that more than anything told me I was doing the right thing. I picked up the phone again and made the first call. The line connected after one ring. "It's Sloan Mercer," I said. "I need to activate the protective withdrawal clause. Segment C only. Leave payroll insulation intact." There was a pause on the other end. "Not surprise, respect." "Understood," the trustee replied. "You want the employee buffer left untouched?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. 60 days. Fully protected, non-negotiable, confirmed. I ended the call and made the second one. The independent CFO answered with a quiet, professional greeting. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, the low hum of someone who worked late, because they understood what responsibility actually meant. "We're executing the contingency," I said. "I need transparency, not spin. Document everything, no blame shifting." A breath. "Then I was hoping you'd say that." The third call was to my lawyer. "I don't want scorched earth," I told her. "I want precision. Withdraw from leveraged risk. Preserve people. Prepare for noise." She didn't ask questions. She never did when things were already this far along. "Give me 30 minutes," she said. "And don't answer anyone else." I set the phone down again and leaned back in my chair. The clock ticked. The house settled around me. Somewhere in the walls, pipes whispered as if passing secrets. I thought of the word revenge and felt it fall flat. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. It demands witnesses. This was correction. I walked to the window and looked out into the dark street. A car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across my lawn. Life continued at its own unbothered pace, indifferent to the tectonic shift happening in a boardroom miles away. The notifications began almost immediately. First a vibration, then another, then a cascade. My phone buzzed on the counter like it had caught a fever. I didn't pick it up yet. I let it ring, let it vibrate, let the sound layer over itself until it became a rhythm, urgent, chaotic, dissonant. It was the sound of a system realizing its safety net was gone. I picked up the phone and looked at the screen. "Evan." I let it go to voicemail. A text followed within seconds. "What did you do?" I didn't respond. Another call came in. A number I didn't recognize, but I knew the type. Partner, investor. Someone suddenly discovering how exposed they were. I silenced the phone and set it face down. This was the part people never understand about boundaries. They think drawing one is cruel. They think it's punishment. But boundaries are how you stop harm from spreading. I thought about the junior associate who had thanked me months ago for insisting on better parental leave policies. The paralegal who brought her toddler to the office one afternoon because childcare fell through. The receptionist who remembered everyone's birthday. They hadn't laughed tonight. They didn't deserve to pay for someone else's arrogance. The next confirmation came quietly, an email from the trustee. Funds withdrawn from high-risk leverage. Employee payroll buffer secured. Automatic safeguards engaged. Clean, exact, humane. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Evan's partner, one of the newer ones. The one who always spoke in half sentences and smiled too quickly. I let it ring out. Then another text came in. From Evan again. "Sloan, this is insane. You can't do this." I almost smiled. Can't is a word people use when they've never read the contracts they signed. I typed one line, deleted it, typed again. Then finally sent it not to him, but to myself first, as a reminder of who I was choosing to be. Don't ask for clarity from someone who benefits from your confusion. I sent it to Evan. Then I turned the phone off. The silence that followed was immediate and profound. No buzzing, no ringing, just the soft ticking of the clock and the faint hum of electricity. I exhaled. For the first time that night, my shoulders dropped. I poured the rest of the tea down the sink, rinsed the mug, and set it carefully in the drying rack. The normalcy of the motion steadied me. I washed my hands, feeling the warmth of the water, grounding myself in sensation. This wasn't over, I knew that. But it had begun on my terms. I walked through the house, turning off lights, locking doors. Each click was deliberate, each action an affirmation. When I reached the front door, I paused. Something felt different. I turned and walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and turned it on again. Notifications flooded in all at once. Missed calls, voicemails, emails marked urgent. And then the door camera alert. I tapped it and the small screen filled with a grainy image of the hallway outside my door. A figure stood there, slightly hunched, hands clasped together. Not pacing, not aggressive, waiting. My breath caught. It wasn't Evan. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart slowing as recognition settled in. It was his mother. I swallowed the weight of the night, shifting once more. Not escalating, deepening. I whispered into the quiet kitchen, the words barely audible but heavy with knowing. This just became family. The phone came back to life like an animal startled awake. It vibrates first, short, sharp bursts against the countertop, then rings, then vibrates again, the sounds overlapping until they blur into something frantic. I don't pick it up right away. I let the noise exist without me filling the kitchen like static. This is what panic sounds like, when it realizes it's alone. I sit at the table and place my palms flat against the wood. It's cool, solid, real. The house smells faintly of lemon and night air drifting in through a cracked window. Somewhere outside, a car door slams. Somewhere else, laughter unrelated, unknowing, floats up from a neighbor's television. Life goes on. The screen lights up again. Evan. Then a second line, one of his partners. Then a third, a number I don't recognize, but I know the cadence of it. Someone used to being answered. Someone who isn't suddenly. I pick up the phone not to answer, just to look. The messages stack, fast tone, shifting with each new one, like a man trying different keys on a locked door. First, anger. You crossed a line. You had no right. Fix this. Now. Then confusion. What happened to the funds? The bank is asking questions. Why is payroll flagged? Then something quieter. More dangerous. Fear. Call me, please. We need to talk. I scroll slowly, deliberately, like I'm reading a report instead of a collapse. My breathing stays even. That feels important. Not because I'm trying to be strong, but because I am. A notification slides in from my lawyer. They're trying to spin. Don't engage. Another from the CFO. Employee accounts secured. No disruptions. I close my eyes and let that line settle in my chest. No disruptions. That was the point. I think of the associates who will wake up tomorrow and go to work without knowing how close they came to being crushed by someone else's ambition. I think of the receptionist who always asked me about my day when I stopped by the office, the interns who believed the firm's mission because they wanted to believe in something. They deserved protection. The phone rings again. I answer this one not by voice, but by reading the voicemail transcript as it appears on screen. Evan's voice rendered into text, stripped of its charm. Sloan, listen. You're making a mistake. This affects people. You can't just stop reading. The irony lands clean and sharp. He had been perfectly willing to affect people when he thought the consequences would fall somewhere else. Another message comes in, this one from someone I recognize, a senior partner Evan brought in late, one of the new advisors. The wording is careful, polished. We believe there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps emotions are running high. Let's resolve this privately. I almost laugh. Privately, quietly. Before the truth gets ideas of its own. I don't reply. Instead, I open my email and draft a single message to the CFO. It's short, clear, protect employees, full transparency, no scapegoating. I send it and feel something loosen in my chest, not relief exactly, but alignment. The sense that my actions and my values are still speaking the same language. The phone buzzes again. A new notification. This one isn't from Evan or his circle. It's from someone who works in compliance. We're seeing unusual attempts to reframe internal communications. Advise, there it is. The story they're trying to build. I see it clearly now, not as suspicion, but as structure. The way tonight unfolded. The laughter. The envelope. The timing. They hadn't just decided to humiliate me. They had planned to remove me. From the narrative, from influence, from leverage. They wanted the firm to believe that I was volatile, emotional, a risk, a wife who couldn't separate personal feelings from business reality. That way, when things went wrong, there would already be a name waiting to carry the blame. Mine. I sit very still, the realization settling. Not as anger, but as resolve. If this ends, it will end with the truth. Not rumors, not whispers, not a convenient villain. I type one more message this time to my lawyer. They're constructing a narrative, prepare disclosure protocols. I hit send. The phone vibrates again, but this time I don't look at it. I set it down and stand walking to the sink, rinsing my hands under warm water. The sound fills the room, steady grounding. I dry them slowly, deliberately. When I turn back, the phone is still buzzing. I pick it up, a text from Evan. Short, unadorned. She's coming over. My stomach tightens, not with fear, but with something heavier. I don't respond. Instead, I walk to the front of the house and glance at the small screen mounted near the door. The door camera blinks softly, waiting. I tap it. The hallway outside my door appears dim and narrow. For a second, it's empty. Then the image refreshes. Someone is standing there now. Not pacing, not knocking, just standing, hands folded, shoulders slightly hunched, the posture of someone bracing for impact. It isn't Evan. I lean closer, my breath catching as recognition settles in. It's his mother. Her coat looks too thin for the night. Her hair is pulled back uneven, like she did it in a hurry. She glances down the hallway, once, then back at the door, lips pressed together. She looks afraid. The phone vibrates in my hand again, but I don't answer it. I don't need to. The chaos on the screen, the missed calls, the messages, the collapsing confidence fades into the background as something quieter, more intimate takes its place. Family doesn't arrive with ringing phones. Family arrives with a knock. I whisper to the empty house, the words landing heavier than any call that came before. And now, it's personal. The knock was softer than I expected. Not urgent, not demanding. Just a careful tapping, like someone afraid the door might disappear if they pressed too hard. I stood in the hallway listening to it echo through the house, letting the sound tell me everything before I answered. I opened the door. She stood there with her hands clasped together, shoulders drawn and eyes red-rimmed and uncertain. Evan's mother, Margaret. She smelled faintly of rain and something floral, an old perfume she'd worn for years. The kind that lingered even after she left a room. I'm sorry, she said immediately, as if apology were the only language she had left. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside. Come in. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold like it was sacred ground. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than any argument. I guided her to the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and reached for 2 mugs. My hands moved on instinct. Familiar motions, safe ones. We didn't speak while the water heated. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of things that didn't need words yet. They're going to put this on you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. They already are. I poured the water slowly, the steam rising between us like a curtain. Sit, I said gently. She sat. They're saying you overreacted, she continued. That you're emotional. That you're trying to punish Evan. I placed the mug in front of her and wrapped my hands around my own. The warmth grounded me. I know, I said. She looked up then, surprised not by the answer, but by the calm in it. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid they'll ruin everything. And afraid that even now you'll still try to save him. There it was. The truth she hadn't meant to say out loud. I met her gaze. I won't protect a lie. Her shoulders sagged, relief and grief tangling together. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The kettle clicked off behind us, forgotten. The house felt smaller now, more human. A sound came from the front door. Footsteps, keys fumbling. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Evan walked in like a man who had run out of exits. He wasn't wearing the suit from the party. No polished confidence. No stage-ready smile. Just a rumpled jacket and eyes that kept darting between his mother and me, like he was looking for the version of the story where this still worked. "You can't do this," he said, the words spilling out too fast. "You can't just dismantle everything overnight." I took a slow breath. "You did that." He shook his head. "This isn't the same." "It is," I said quietly. "You just don't like how it feels from this side." His mother stood then, her movements unsteady but deliberate. "Evan," she said, and there was steel in her voice I hadn't heard before. "Enough." He looked at her stunned. "I watched you tonight," she continued. "I watched you laugh while she stood there. I watched you treat your marriage like a negotiation." His mouth opened, closed. I stepped forward. "I came tonight to give you something," I said. "Something I believed in." His eyes flicked to me. "What are you talking about?" I walked to the dining table and picked up the folded paper I had set aside earlier. I unfolded it and placed it between us. "A pro bono fund," I said, "in your father's name, to help people who can't afford to be strategic about justice. I was going to announce it tonight." His breath hitched. "You never looked at me," I continued. "Not once. So, I never gave it." The silence that followed was profound. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Evan sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him all at once. His hands covered his face. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "You didn't ask," I replied. His mother reached for my hand, her grip trembling. "You're still choosing the right thing," she whispered. "Even now," I nodded, but not without boundaries. I turned back to Evan. "Here are the terms." He looked up, eyes hollow. "Independent governance," I said. "Temporary, full transparency. An external review of every financial decision made in the last 6 months." He swallowed. "And you, I'm not coming back," I said gently. "This isn't reconciliation," he flinched. "But I won't let innocent people be crushed," I continued. "You will issue a public apology to your staff and your clients. Not spin. Truth. You will take responsibility for the contracts you signed and the culture you encouraged." He stared at me, stunned. "You're still helping," I'm correcting, I said. "There's a difference." His mother squeezed my hand. "Thank you." Before either of them could say anything else, my phone vibrated on the counter. Once. Then again. I glanced at the screen. A message. From my lawyer. "We have something." My pulse slowed, sharpened. I opened it. Attached were documents, emails, messages, timelines, evidence. One of Evan's closest partners, his loudest supporter, had orchestrated the public humiliation, the laughter, the envelope, the narrative that painted me as unstable. It wasn't a moment of cruelty. It was strategy. I looked up at Evan, the weight of the truth settling into place. "This wasn't just betrayal," I said softly. "It was a plan." His face crumpled, not in anger, but in realization. And in that moment, I knew. The next chapter wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about reckoning. Morning arrived quietly, as if the night had exhausted itself. The house felt different in daylight, less like a battleground, more like a place that had survived something. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, landing on the table where so many decisions had been made without raising a voice. I stood there with a mug of coffee warming my hands, listening to the soft sounds of a neighborhood waking up, a distant lawnmower, a car door closing, a child laughing somewhere down the street. Normal life resuming. The truth came out the way truth usually does, not with fireworks, but with paperwork. Emails forwarded, timelines aligned, documents that spoke in unemotional fonts and timestamps impossible to argue with. The partner who had directed the humiliation tried first to deny it, then to reframe it, then, when the evidence stacked too high, to disappear behind lawyers and vague statements. It didn't work. By noon, the firm issued a notice. Not a press release, a notice. Governance would shift temporarily to an independent board. An external review would begin immediately. The partner's name was absent from the list of decision-makers. Evan signed it all without protest. When he came to the house later that day, he didn't knock. He waited until I opened the door like someone who understood he no longer had the right to enter uninvited. He looked older, not ruined, just stripped of the illusions that had been holding him upright. "They were using me," he said quietly, standing on the porch. "And I let them." I nodded. "You did." He flinched, then exhaled. "I didn't just betray you," he said. "I sold myself." There was no satisfaction in hearing it, only clarity. Inside, his mother sat at the table, her hands folded around a mug of tea. When she saw him, her eyes filled, but she didn't rush to comfort him. She stayed where she was, steady and present, the way parents learn to be, when rescue would only delay the lesson. "I'm sorry," Evan said to both of us. The words mattered, but they weren't enough on their own. He knew that now. The apology to the firm came that afternoon. Not polished, not defensive. He took responsibility for the choices he made and the culture he allowed to grow. He named the harm without naming a scapegoat. I watched it later alone, sitting on the edge of the bed. His voice cracked once. He didn't recover quickly. That mattered too. Payroll went out on time. Benefits stayed intact. The assistants and associates kept their jobs. I received a quiet email from the CFO confirming it, and I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the relief move through me like a slow tide. No one innocent was crushed. That night, Evan's mother stayed for dinner. We cooked together simple food, nothing fancy. The kind of meal that didn't ask to be photographed or praised. As we ate, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You still chose what was right," she said. "Even when it cost you." I squeezed her fingers gently. "I chose myself." She nodded, understanding more than she said. Later, when the dishes were done and the house grew quiet again, Evan stood in the doorway of the living room, hesitant. "What do you take?" he asked softly. I looked at him. Really looked. Not the man I married. Not the man who stood on a stage and laughed while I was erased. Just a man facing the consequences of his own decisions. "I take my peace," I said. "My name, and the part of me that kept trying to earn love by becoming smaller." He swallowed. "Is that all?" I smiled, not unkindly. "It's everything." He nodded once, then turned and left. The door closed behind him without drama. No echo. No final argument. Just a clean ending. In the weeks that followed, I moved through my days with a lightness that felt unfamiliar at first. Not happiness exactly, something steadier. Alignment. I woke up without bracing myself. I answered emails without checking my pulse. I slept through the night. The pro bono fund didn't disappear. It changed. I redirected it quietly without announcements or stages. It no longer carried Evan's father's name, not out of spite, but out of honesty. I attached it to a set of values instead. To access, to dignity, to justice without performance. It felt right. One afternoon, I walked past the old firm's building. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. The air outside smelled like rain and warm concrete. I stood there for a moment, listening to the city breathe, and realized something that surprised me. I felt no urge to look back, because I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was walking away whole. People often confuse walking away with losing. They imagine empty hands, regret, loneliness. They're wrong. Sometimes walking away is how you finally stop bleeding. Sometimes it's how you claim the life that was waiting for you on the other side of endurance. I thought of the line I had written once back when I believed love could be managed if I tried hard enough. If someone needs you small to feel big, they don't love you. They consume you. I whispered it now, not as a warning, but as a benediction. The night settled around me gently. The world felt open, not demanding, not urgent. Just possible. I closed the door behind me, turned off the light, and walked forward with everything. A quiet word before you go. If this story stayed with you, let it stay for the right reason. Sloane's journey isn't about winning or losing a marriage. It's about remembering that silence is not weakness, boundaries are not cruelty, and walking away is sometimes the most powerful way to choose yourself. Many of us are taught to endure, to explain, to shrink, but healing often begins the moment we stop trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding us. If you've ever been in a room where laughter cut deeper than words, if you've ever given everything and been told it was nothing, or if you've ever watched someone you love lose themselves trying to keep the peace, this story is for you. I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced a moment where choosing yourself changed everything? Or have you witnessed someone walk away with dignity instead of applause? Share your story in the comments. And tell us where you're listening from, your city, your state, your corner of the world. These stories travel farther when we know we're not alone. If you found comfort, strength, or clarity here, consider subscribing to the channel. We share stories like this every week. Stories about healing, second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to raise its voice. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for staying until the end. Until next time, take care of your boundaries. Honor your truth, and remember, sometimes walking away is how you finally come home.